Hello, and welcome to the 101 Earth Observation virtual lecture series. This series is delivered by the Satellite Applications Catapult in partnership with WILDLABS. This lecture is all about passive remote sensing application. We have seen in the previous video an overview of application. Now we will look a bit more in detail some theoretical aspects that are within those applications. The first concept I want to introduce you, it's an important product from optical remote sensing, which is called Normalized Different Vegetation Index, or NDVI. This is an index, or it's a product, which is defined as in the equation over there. So it's a product that takes the near infrared and the red band and combine these properly to derive that product, the NDVI. Why this is important? NDVI is very important because it's used often to detect vegetation and to estimate generally a green biomass. It's very much related to vegetation health, as I will explain in the next slide. And there are clearly strong variation depending on the different season and even different year. We can see an example in this figure of a summer versus a winter capture of the NDVI. You can see actually how vegetation areas, they're quite captured here in green, just looking at this specific product. Why this relates to the vegetation health? So again, we are using near infrared and red bands, and we can see how a healthy plant in this case absorb a high quantity of red and reflect a larger quantity of near infrared, while an unhealthy plant or a plant that is just aging, as we have in the right, absorb a smaller portion of visible infrared and reflect also a smaller portion of near infrared. This absorption and reflection is linked to some physical phenomena and some specific physical aspects of the interaction of leaves and general vegetation with the light, and specifically to the quantity of chlorophyll that we have into plants. Anyhow, just putting the numbers here and just seeing those specific numbers into this NDVI equation, we see how the healthy plant in this case is an NDVI of 0.72, while the unhealthy, let's say, plant has a much lower NDVI, 0.14. This is the overall concept over this specific index. We see another example in the figure at the right, where the NDVI product is the colored figure at the bottom, and we see how the vegetation actually is captured very well, again, as a green, in green. In NDVI is not the only index. Optical remote sensing use several indices to capture different, phenomena. An example of another index is an index that is proportional to the quantity of chlorophyll. So we see this index at the bottom of this slide. Why this is important? An example is, for example, to measure water quality. We have a specific example here of a lake in the Netherlands that it's quite important because it's a drinkable water reserve. So it must be kept free from algae. Algae means higher quantity of chlorophyll. And by studying, the quantity of chlorophyll into the lake, in the lake itself, we can actually, understand whether there is a good drinkable quality or a poor drinkable quality. So we see this in this plot. What is probably remarkable here is the spectral profile that we see. So this linked to a concept that I described before, which is the spectral resolution. You see this is a continuous line, but this is simply the link of different bands. So in reality, in this plot, we've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 different points which are linked together. So this is the spectral information that we have. And we can see how the lake has the spectral information that is like in red in the bottom. If you recall, in the second lecture, we have seen how water behaves like that. While an urban area, no, sorry, an agricultural area over there has a different trend. Now, this specific index look at the blue and the red part of it, and does like operation to understand whether there is chlorophyll and the quantity of chlorophyll, or much or less quantity, as in the plot over there. Anyhow, the concept that I want to give you here alongside the application is the spectral profile. By looking again at the spectrum, we can understand other type of phenomena, more on the agricultural domain in this case, such as the health of potato crops. In this case, we are looking at nitrogen, and what is interesting here is to relate the quantity of nitrogen with our information, and we see this specific plot over here. Now, this implies clearly some modeling of nitrogen versus, in this case, we are looking at a specific part of the spectrum, which is called red edge, towards the red edge. So we have a red edge versus nitrogen here. So it needs this modeling. For this modeling, very often, and I'm linking to the first lecture, we need data on ground to calibrate this, or to understand which quantity of nitrogen corresponds to the specific red edge component. It's called red edge, by the way, because we are in the portion of the spectrum where vegetation has a steep increase over the red. So if you recall, again, in one of the figures that I've shown at the beginning, the spectral trend of vegetation is typically quite low in the visible part of the spectrum, then increase steeply over the red. And this is also called red edge. By studying that specific portion of the spectrum, we can study so many different properties of vegetation, such as in this case, the nitrogen. Another application with optical remote sensing is studying wildfires. So, for example, having a description of the severity of the wildfire. Again, this can be done through several indices, such as the burn index ratio, it is over there, or the difference of it. So there are several indices here. And we see also an example here of a wildfire shown in different bands. This has been captured with a specific hyperspectral sensor, which is called Hyperion. There aren't many hyperspectral sensors at the moment up there that provide with data. And if you just look at public hyperspectral sensor, there are very little. So Hyperion has been a mission that is actually has been there for many years, since like the early 2000s, and since for many years that was the only hyperspectral mission. Now there are several more, and one is mentioned there. It's called Prisma. It's from the Italian Space Agency, and it's also a promising one. Another application on pollution, it's more on mining and acid mine drainage. So this is when we have a mining setting clearly, and chemical reaction that are used within the mining, let's say, processing, are dissolved and transmit into the environment. This is a bad, actually, obviously a bad phenomena for the environment, and it's bad for many reasons, as you see there. So there is a potential contamination of drinking water, there is a corrosion of bridges, and there are general damages to the ecosystem. So clearly, this is something that must be avoided. It's a major environmental contamination. Just as a statistic, there in the US, there are 10,000 kilometers of rivers that contains above safe concentration of metals, no, due to these operations. And it's still a major issue in some countries due to, for example, illegal gold mining and the release of mercury into the rivers. So those are all huge environmental issues. How can remote sensing help here? We can help in mapping it. So we can help him map, for example, the different minerals associated with that phenomena. Again, we are looking at the spectrum, so we see the spectral, in this case, characteristic of different minerals, and just by mapping this into the environment, we can have a description of the pollution. If we move to the sea side, we can study oil spills, and we can also inspect oil spills. Oil spills can be studied both with optical and radar data. In this case, we see an example of optical data, where again we are looking at the spectral description of the oil spill, and this was an experiment that has been done by the USGS. That was a lab test that was looking at the different component of the spectrum for different thickness of the oil. So they were looking, for instance, at the thickness of 0.5 millimeter versus something more, which I can read, but is in the figure over there. So basically, by studying the different, thickness of the oil and the spectral components associated to it, it's possible to classify it and to detect it. Another application, quite popular, is in the earth science. So, for example, looking at volcanic SO2 plume. So this is again looking at the atmospheric side, in this case, and atmospheric part of the of our planet, and looking at the signature of SO2, which is quite a unique one. This can be studied. In this case here, we see a couple of examples over the Hawaii Islands down there. And this is particularly important to study phenomena and to forecast also, the direction of the plume and the intensity of it. Moving a bit more into conservation, we have applications such as estimating colony sizes of penguins from space. This is quite a funny one, maybe, because an estimation of penguins in this case has been done in 2014 by looking at penguins' excrement, which appear over ice as like some color like pink or gray, as we see over there. So by studying specifically, those color and classifying very high resolution imagery, it was possible to detect colony sizes of penguins from space. Another application, it's on the seaside, is actually counting whales. In this case, high resolution data from, again, WorldView 2 has been used to detect the whales, in this case in Argentina. Now, for this specific study, the blue band has been used because blue slightly penetrate into the water column, and therefore if a whale is like, at the near surface but still within water, it's possible to detect it. And we see different signature here of whales. Final application, again with high resolution data, it's on counting elephants. In this case, we are in the savannah in Africa, and wall view data has been used to detect elephants. An important point here, and also in the previous slide, is the use of what you read here, convolutional neural network, is the use of artificial intelligence and deep learning for remote sensing study. So this is a big trend in the remote sensing sector, and it's used more and more each days. So the processing bit that I described in the first slide very often involves artificial intelligence, such as in this example.